Hello, thank you for joining me today to talk about the culture of virgins, women, and rape. This part of our lives is greatly misunderstood today, and I hope to give what I can to better understand the deep pain and bliss people have alternately experienced in sex. My goal is to vindicate those who have suffered through a misuse of sex and to celebrate with those who have found its joys. I hope you will be patient with me. So with that in mind, let's begin. Any nation's culture can be deduced from what its women accept as normal, even when this normalcy, that is, these customs and manners, actually hurt them. For example, polygamy, child marriage, and in some cases even rape are all accepted by the women of some nations and people groups as normal. Such customs and manners are not at all accepted as normal by the mainstream of men or women in Western civilization. Far from approaching such acts as customary, the culturally iconic upstanding male of the West disdains these violations of the system in which he himself seeks female companionship and familial solidarity. In like manner, the women of his Western culture consent with like disdain. Rape is not approved as normal in the West. However, a growing ignorance regarding the nature of sexual union between men and women has led to a growing depreciation of sex and of women in the West, which could very well lead to a culture of rape if not curbed. If we are to avoid the full breakdown of our fragmenting society and preserve our nation, the innate nature of women must be understood, acknowledged, and esteemed. A close look at the manners and customs of virgins and women will underscore the depth of sexual union and the irrevocable tragedy of rape, which is increasing in our culture. Before 1977, a man could be put to death for raping a woman. This custom was overturned by the American legal system upon the grounds that death was a, quote, cruel and unusual punishment for the crime of rape, and thereby violated the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. This amendment, adopted by our founding fathers in 1791 from the English Bill of Rights, dating all the way back to 1689, never called down enough doubt upon the commensurate nature of rape with death to do away with the punishment until quite a lot had transpired in Western civilization in the years leading up to 1977. Beginning in the 1920s, the first big shift in American values can be seen in the popular cultural movement of jazz music. During this time, famously known as the Roaring Twenties, the traditional unity of the family began to fall apart. The American girl setting out upon this new course of life was encouraged to pursue a deeper happiness than her mother and father had had under the constraints of long-held traditions. Hollywood movie stars began setting the trend of cropping the hair, wearing shorter skirts, holding marital standings lightly, and dancing the Charleston until the wee hours of the morning, because, well, some like it hot, real hot, as Norma Jean Baker, better known as Marilyn Monroe, says in the movie Some Like It Hot. This movie helped to glamorize the period in which she herself was born in. Hollywood made Baker the new ever-progressing ideal of the sexually desirable, quote, American girl. Norma Jean, born a natural brunette, had been abandoned by her father and was also molested as a child. Left alone with a mother suffering from psychosis, Norma Jean set off to find her American dream with a bottle of hair dye in hand. Following the promised dreams of a photographer, she was passed down the line, sleeping with producers all the way, in hopes of catching someone's approval above her fellow starlets. Eventually her willingness paid off, for consequently the new emerging American man had got the Hollywood picture of Marilyn Monroe solidly in his head by 1962, the year she died. Norma Jean Baker, under the guise of Marilyn Monroe, was presented to men as the new measure of the good woman, and women in turn were given a new king in the gyrations of Elvis Presley, who picked up that hot jazz and spun a new song to sing in his rock and roll. Before his enthronement, Presley actually had a hard time getting off the ground. It is said that after his return from military service, he stood on a busy street corner in Los Angeles for a solid hour, and not a single person paid him any mind. This, of course, was remedied by his producers, and American culture progressed. Girls learned the new etiquette of concert hysteria, and skirts got a little shorter. With such heralds as Jazz, Marilyn, and Presley, The free love movement in Woodstock seemed an appropriate means of stomaching progressive pop culture to the loss of tradition. Plato said that when a nation's music changes, its laws will shortly thereafter change. This seems true, for why else would a president, Richard Nixon of the United States, care to shake the king's hand if the hearts of the people were not fastened on a new direction? Since then, much has transpired in our legal system to keep pace with the movements of popularized culture. Divorce was made more feasible, foster systems were established, obstacles to abortion were removed, fathers were constrained to care for whatever children the mother chose to keep, food stamps were passed around, and men were relieved of that, quote, cruel and unusual punishment too long tied up with, quote, mere sexual assault. And all to silence that incessant knocking on the courtroom doors which erupted upon the throes of the 20th century. America got with the times. This vacuous void in American culture finds its origins in the disbandment of the Western family, at the removal of its traditional female. As a girl progresses in her natural development from girlhood to womanhood, she provides stability and consistency to those attached to her. The breakdown and violation of this order has led to the upheaval of Western culture. This has brought us to the brink of a culture now commonly mistaken as a culture of rape, which does in fact exist where this process has fully bloomed from centuries and millennia ago. Along with the lost traditions, which had maintained the Western family for over 1,000 years, an understanding of what actually happens at the center of a relationship in sexual union was lost on the West during this great downturn of events. Though this conscious awareness is worn frightfully thin, the intuitive awareness, thankfully, remains intact and creates the repugnancy, or the repugnance many people still feel when a man is given only 3 months in prison for raping an unconscious girl behind a dumpster. Many understand that such a punishment in no way measures up to what he actually did to her, but practically no one, outside perhaps her immediate family, ever considers death as commensurate to his violation of this girl, as was the status quo in this country just 40 years ago. If we are to halt this tailspin of Western values, the valuation of sexual union must again be elevated to its proper dignity. An anthropological understanding of the male and female psychosomatic relationship must be had in true depth. The foundation stone which firmly maintained the family unit, societal peace, and real cultural development lies in a few short verses from the Christian scriptures taught to our formerly barbaric ancestors by the likes of St. Patrick, St. Columba, St. Benedict, St. Boniface, Saints Cyril, and Methodius, and their contemporaries. Prior to this, European barbarism was a real thing. Pillaging, murder, adultery, widow killing, and rape were common customs until Christianity raised the subconsciousness of our forefathers to the cognitive level, to be groomed into one of the healthiest cultures known in the history of the world, surpassing even the classical age of Greco-Roman civilization and the ancient Near East. In this new Western culture, a woman achieved great honor and respect and found her icon in the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God. From the doctrine of the Virgin Mary and the short creation narrative of woman found in Genesis 1 and 2, a woman's purity and ability to perpetuate the family hearth were hailed, highly esteemed, and protected. So let's take a look at this foundational narrative of 1,000 years, a look at Adam and Eve, and see what it elucidates still present in our own culture. In the beginning, God formed man, dust from the earth, and breathed into his face a breath of life, and the man became a living being. Then the Lord God said, "It is not good that the man is alone. Let us make him a help like unto himself." And out of the earth God furthermore formed all the animals of the field, and all the birds of the sky, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And anything whatever Adam called it as living creature, this was its name. But for Adam there was not found a help like unto himself. And God cast a trance upon Adam, and he slept. And God took one of his ribs and filled up the flesh in its place. And the rib that he had taken from Adam, the Lord God fashioned into a woman, and brought her to Adam. And Adam said, This now is bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of her man she was taken. On account of this, a man will leave his father and mother, and will be joined to his woman, or his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Of course, the Christian and Western concept of marriage was based on this passage. However, if we look at it more carefully, the concept of marriage is seen to be more than an arbitrary construct of social convenience. It bears within it the very fabric of the human psychology of both men and women and how they relate to each other. Firstly, that identity is tied up in one's place of origin. And secondly, that man names woman, who in turn hears and accepts the name through her response. Man and woman have two separate points of origin. Adam, on the one hand, is taken directly from the earth. That is to say, he touches the world directly, without any mediation. Therefore, the points of his compass and origin are fixed and immovable. Eve, on the other hand, because she is formed from a bone of Adam's body, and not the earth directly, is thereby insulated from direct contact with the world at large through Adam's direct contact, and is able to follow Adam from his point of origin. Adam touches the earth, Eve touches Adam. Her connection to the world is through Adam. The name Adam is a Hebrew word which simply means earth, or red earth, and sometimes just means red, and thence by analogy also blood. In poetry it sometimes just means man. However, the actual word man in the original Hebrew is ish, which appears in its feminine form as isha, corresponding directly to our English word woman. The ah in Hebrew denotes a diminutive, that is, a point of origin. For example, the Hebrew word for bird is sephor. The addition of an ah makes sephorah, that is, a little bird. A little bird is derived from a bird, to state the obvious. The concept of woman is derived from association with man. In other words, the already accurate word woman could also be rendered as manette or maness. Now, before going on, it is important to point out that the image of a rib being taken out of Adam and the flesh of its place being filled up and woman being formed from the rib is an explicit image of sexual union. Marriage and sex are not separate of each other. Sex is not something merely waited for until marriage among religious traditionalists. Sex itself constitutes a marriage, or consummates a marriage, if you will. Eve was created out of an act of marriage. If we take a quick look at male and female sexual anatomy, that is, body forms, this becomes obvious. The male organ is the one place of a man's body which he does not have direct control over. A woman arouses a man, and his organ goes outside himself, as Adam's, quote, rib, to enter the woman. Now the male organ enters the woman precisely where she is not. When God had taken the rib from Adam, he filled up the flesh in its place. This is what happens during sex. If we parallel the creation narrative of woman from man with this, the rib belongs to the woman, and the flesh that fills back in the void of the man replaces what had been his originally. The hard rib is given in exchange for soft flesh. When this first occurred in the creation narrative, blood would have appeared, but in the man's flesh, as the rib went out from Adam. However, Adam and Eve are different from today because they came into the world already bound together. Eve was, quote, born an adult woman. The unmarried girl of today naturally does not correspond exactly to this narrative. She rather chooses the man she wishes to identify with. Therefore, she holds the key to their union within her own flesh, which she gives away in her bleeding. And so her blood becomes his blood, if you will, when she bleeds on account of him at their first exchange. The man and the woman each possess what is given to the other. The two are interdependent. Let me explain. If Adam decided that he no longer wanted to depend upon the earth, the dust, for his identity, he could not make this break without also ceasing to exist as Adam, as man, made of dust. He would therefore cease to exist at all. In like manner, Eve could not undo her point of origin from Adam's rib without also undoing her very nature as woman attached to Adam. Once God took her directly from man, or Adam, there was no going back. Moving on from here, let us take a look at the significance of naming, which follows in the narrative. Presumably, God names the man Adam, as the name Adam is the only one unaccounted for in the name acquisition process. The name Adam describes man's origin. From here, Adam provides his own logic from his own point of reference to name the rest of creation. That is to say, the nature of the world's origin and its constituting parts by giving names to all living things. He does this from his point of view as an earth-grounded man. And of course, included within the world of Adam is the additional creature, his wife, whom God made just for him and from his own side, which Adam thusly calls woman, that is, taken from man. So the name Adam goes back to the ground. The name woman goes back to Adam. This is why when a woman marries, traditionally she takes the family name of her husband, her man, her Adam, her point of origin. This is not merely a sentimental gesture of love and affection, but an actual indication of her new point of view provided her during sexual union, during rib extraction, if you will. However, contrary to the order of events in the scriptural narrative, in actual practice, the naming, the calling, if we extend naming to wooing, comes first, and then the physical reorientation of points of origin through sex. Because girls now come into the world as virgins, unlike Eve. In the beginning, God brought Eve back to her point of origin in Adam, who recognized her in saying to her, quote, "Bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh." Thus he called her woman. However, when offering words to a girl, she chooses whether or not to answer the man back. She allows her response or reaction to the extent that she actually wants the identity being offered to her instead of other available identities of other men. Now, in the narrative of Adam and Eve, Eve only had the one man, Adam, to choose. Modern women are a little different from Eve insofar as they have many men to choose from and are not born adult women already attached to a man, as Eve was. Every girl born after Eve down to the modern age is born an unattached virgin, free to choose her own name. That is, the name she will be called by, appropriate to her union and family line, leaving her old maiden name behind. So, what prompts a man to speak with a girl? It is a known fact that a man is visually oriented, and a girl sees the world not with her eyes, but with her ears. If a man cannot say the right things to move a girl's heart, he will have no lasting effect upon her. He scopes out the world according to his interpretation, and in that seeks a beauty which corresponds to his reality, which lines up with his unique Adam position. As is commonly said, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. When he finds beauty, his innate impulse is to tell her so. He does this poetically, whether he be a poet or not, by relating the nature of her beauty to his worldview, and that, within her ear, to either be heard or rejected by her. Poet is a Latin word derived from Greek, whose essential meaning is to interweave. Adam does not merely identify Eve in the world. He identifies her relative to his world, grounded in the vantage point God has given him in his masculine origination. From this, he speaks to her, and she chooses whether or not to hear him and recognize his worldview as her own. A man uses his view of the world from his perspective to convince a girl of her beauty and hopes that his words will pleasure her ear. He tries to weave her reality, he tries to weave her into his reality with his words. When a man sees a girl whom he thinks is beautiful, and especially when he falls in love with her, he will naturally begin to see her everywhere in his world. He will liken her to just about anything to make her appreciate her own beauty within his context. He sees a hilltop covered in green cedars, and suddenly he is reminded of the color of her eyes. He sees a field of golden wheat swaying in the cool breeze, and suddenly he recalls her golden tresses flowing down past her shoulders. When a man loves a girl, usually the first thing he will tell his friends and family is how beautiful she is. Her beauty corresponds to his logic for him. In trying to make her heart like his own, he will try to persuade her of his point of view. If she chooses to hear his words, she will slowly come to adopt his logic as she begins to realize her own beauty in his eyes. When a girl begins to love the man back, she will usually tell her friends and family how smart he is. That is, how logical he is. This is all truly a mystery, for not all poetry works on every girl. Just as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is logic in the ear of the hearer. The two are on their way now to becoming one flesh, which of course cannot be fully realized until it involves the body, in addition to the soul or the psyche. The wooing must advance, sex must be had, the body must be included, or better still, the souls must be tied together through the body. Adam's rib must transform the maiden into a woman, the girl into his woman. If we contrast man's nature in his direct connection to the ground, with his feet firmly planted in place, with woman's, whose feet don't actually touch the ground because she was taken from Adam and not the ground, we see that many various phenomena in casual romance still bespeak this. For example, in Western culture, women are accustomed to wearing elevated heels, which break the direct contact of their feet with the ground. This is almost always viewed as attractive, as is seen at formals. That heels require a lot of focus and cause a lot of pain, nevertheless do not deter women from pursuing this art of refinement, elegance, and femininity in accord with this religious narrative, which many women have probably never even heard of. And secondly, we have the famous, quote, heel-popping kiss. And just in case you are unaware of this custom, it is a common mannerism for a girl to pop a heel, as is seen in a lot of movies, up into the air, away from the ground, when she is kissed by a man. Depending on the depth of the affection tied up in the kiss, both feet may come off the ground, leaving the girl hanging completely upon the man's neck and away from the ground. His feet are planted on the ground, and she floats, if you will, in his arms. He has lifted her to himself, where he himself stands. Since it is toward his point of origin that she moves, it seems appropriate that she would also obtain his name in addition to his position. This brings us at last to the threshold tradition, where a new bridegroom will often carry his new bride across the threshold and into the marriage chamber, where her feet will finally be tied down together with his. He lifts her above the ground and carries her to his place. This is where the expression "sweep her off her feet" comes from, and this is all bliss if they both love each other truly and freely. This is a natural order of events for the relation of men and women, so long as the girl is willing. The word virgin is not actually an English word. It in fact comes from the Latin word virgo, whose deeper meaning is tied to the imagery of a shoot or sprout, which is capable of being grafted into another tree. The closest modern English word I believe we have for this is simply girl, which of course has broader meaning, which nonetheless we disassociate with a full-fledged woman who is married and pushing a stroller down the street. Such a woman, attached in marriage to her man, is thus set upon her course in life. The unattached virgin girl is still able to flit about in the process of choosing the person who will ground her like a married woman. Let me explain. When Eve was taken from the side of Adam amidst his blood flow, the effect was irreversible. There was no way to undo it. She was attached to him for life and set upon her course. In like manner, after a virgin girl has sex for the first time, there is no way for her to bleed again after that. there is no undoing the union. The very nature of the word virgin implies the ability to entertain various words and points of view of different men, that is, different trees to be grafted into. Her mobility as a virgin allows her to take in ideas as quickly as she wishes to discard them, because such ideas cannot take firm root in her until she gives away her body in addition to her mind. She must involve her heart and give away its key to actualize any man's hope that he may speak of. A woman's strength is therefore her purity. In such a state, she is the sole gatekeeper of her destiny. The point of view she chooses to perpetuate in her children is attached to the man she chooses to sleep with. She will make all his views a reality to be passed on to their children. In the presence of love, this union is bliss, a life happily ever after. Upon these principles, Western civilization has passed on its traditions through the family unit, solidified by the virtue of countless maidens down through the centuries. When the modern Western woman chooses to sidestep her tradition and sleep with multiple men, she creates confusion for herself and undermines her ability to fully empower any one man. She rather conflates various world systems into a single logical system, which bears little resemblance to her own past heritage, free of pluralities. Whatever may drive a woman to behave thusly, what she is actually doing is grounding her personality at random, and then abandoning the men and their worlds that actually belong to her. She disregards herself along with the various men she moves on from. Of course, oftentimes the men do the abandoning too. In this way, the persons exchanged during sex become so cheapened, they are eventually given and taken freely without any weight at all, and hereby came the free love movement with all its songs and new laws. The unspeakable tragedy of rape is that an innocent girl is forcibly devalued in this way and shrouded in such a world of darkness as this against her will. Disregarded, unloved, and alone. Rape, taken from the Latin rapere, to steal or snatch away, describes the loss of a virgin perfectly. Her life as a free person to choose her own course is ended by a rapist who violates the natural unfolding of love and marriage. This reality is what drove our traditional generations of the past to require his life in exchange for hers. Such a concept was not abandoned without much cheapening of sexuality in Western civilization. Our inherited Western culture still intuitively values these customs and manners, though the awareness of their violation has been so horrifically mitigated that our courts and media hardly bat an eye at the loss of a single precious life in keeping perfect pace with the hyperinflation of sex and growing admiration of cultures and subcultures who in fact think very little of rape. So again, a rape culture does not exist in Western civilization, but a woman's purity must be prized again in our culture if we are to improve. Again, if you have suffered in this part of your life, you can recover in time. Keep up your hope with patience and try to find someone who is mature and trustworthy that can help you through the recovery process. If you have discovered the bliss of pure marriage, thank God for that. And thank you for listening to me today, and God bless you.